Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Coolangatta room. We've got Brett Williams from Sentinel-1 talking this morning. Brett is a cyber threat intelligence and cybercrime specialist with over 30 years of experience in IT and security. His expertise spans insider threats, incident response, fraud, crypto crime, the dark web, where he has tracked threat actors and underground marketplaces. Brett has held senior roles with leading organizations including Sentinel-1, Fortra, Chainalysis, Flashpoint, Carbon Black and RSA, and he is a co-organizer of the excellent B-Sides Melbourne, which has just happened recently. He's an active mentor for emerging professionals, and he's a regular speaker at events such as ISA, RSA, and the AIPIO Intelligence Conference. Brett is widely recognized for delivering insights into how cybercrime ecosystems operate and how organizations can respond. And today he's talking about when attackers use AI and how defenders can respond. Please welcome Brett.
Thank you. That was a long bio, makes me sound really old, which I am, been around for a while. So yeah, what I want to do today is sort of step through both the malicious and legitimate use of AI and what we can do as defenders to sort of get control of that, because I think it's fair to say we're at that point where we all know AI is everywhere, right? This is an incredibly fast moving space. I've been through a lot of revolutions and evolutions over IT. You know, I started in the industry when email did not exist in my organisation. I had to convince my boss that email would help us communicate. Right, that was in the 90s. Then we went through cloud. Right, everyone said, "Oh, cloud." No one wanted to go to the cloud. Virtualization, and that took probably 10, 15 years to take off. And now SaaS is everywhere. Where this is really only about a year old, and it's just grown so fast, right? And it's something we have to deal with. So it's fair to say it's no longer a trend. It's happening. And there's two sides to the coin, right? It's a really powerful defensive tool. AI can help us as defenders more than anything else we've had in our history. Whether you're writing detection rules, responding to threats, coding, all that sort of stuff makes AI makes that accelerate to make our response easier. On the other side of that coin, though, is it gives us a much larger attack surface. So when we talk about the attack surface, is how is our AI being protected against adversaries, but how are the adversaries using AI against us? And it's fair to say, it won't be long, you've probably already got AI in use, right? We're a massive Claude house at Sentinel-1. Every employee about 2 weeks ago got full access to enterprise Claude, including co-work. We're NCP servers everywhere, which is, for a security company, it was obviously a big move for us. And I think we're going to see that more and more. But if you're not actually endorsing it or doing it yourself, you're going to have shadow. Employees are going to be using this regardless. Unlike a lot of trends we've seen in cyber and IT, this is a consumer-facing trend as well. In the early days of cloud, no one really cared out. Your mum and dad didn't care about it if they weren't in the industry. But now everyone knows about ChatGPT and Claude, and they're using it. So we've seen, the use of AI, shadow AI, growing. Right? One of our recent surveys we did, just in the small organisations, sub 1,000, there was 42 different AIs being used, right, across that sort of size. And as you get up, it gets larger, right, with 72. So there's a lot of risk there and getting control of that. If you flip it on the other side, vibe coding, we all heard of this, no doubt, right? This is the ability to code super fast and get things done. I haven't coded in years, and I've been coding stuff. It's been fun getting back into coding. When I say I've been coding, Claude has. But the problem is it's also open to threats. And we've seen credentials leaked. In the traditional sense, we've always seen creds leak up onto GitHub and those repositories. Developers accidentally put their AWS tokens, their credentials up there. But that's common. Around 4% we see that, but that's grown. Now we're starting to see LLM-based repositories empowered, so people are automatically pushing things up to GitHub through Claude Code. The other area is malicious code, and this is the typical supply chain attack that we've dealt with for years. And in the coding space, supply chain attacks obviously mean I may inject wrong code into my applications. These two samples here is a Claude Code NCP server you can download. They look pretty similar. The top one's the real one, the bottom one's a fake one. Now, if you weren't really looking and you weren't looking closely enough, it'd be hard. You could just download one and suddenly your Claude Code is now writing and embedding malicious code into your platform. We've all heard of AI agents, right? It's amazing how many different types there are though, right? We've got OpenClaw. Have anyone played with OpenClaw before? It's pretty cool. Scary, cool. Obviously, we've got AI coding now with VS Code, Windsurf, and the like, all the way through terminals, NCP servers, desktop clients like Claude Desktop, OpenAI, and then browser plugins. It's endless. And each one of these is not only a threat, it's an attack surface that can be attacked. And as defenders, we've got to really understand the broad set. And what that really comes down to where we used to be to where we are today. Yeah? One user would log on to many applications and we protect it. Now we've got one user logging on and using many agents, and those many agents logging on to multiple applications. So the problem just starts to expand out, right? So that makes it very difficult to keep on top of. So let's jump into sort of a little bit around the cybercrime and the ecosystem itself. I normally ask this, if anyone's seen me present, I always ask the audience, anyone want to take a guess what year, roughly, was the first cybercrime committed, or e-crime? Anyone have a guess? No? Sorry? Well, I wish it was that late. Close though, try 1834. So you may, if you Google it, you'll look up, there's a French telegraph attack. Anyone understand how financial markets work? It's all about time. So if I'm in Paris and I want to intercept the stock market, I went to a telegraph station and we did a man-in-the-middle attack and listened to the Morse code and do trading. So there's two brothers who hacked the French telegraph purely to get financial advantage. So that was in 1834. Fast forward, in the early days, it was just very basic malware, fun malware. Right? You'd download something, it would play some stupid noise and pop a screen picture up. It wasn't particularly malicious. We then started seeing proper attackers coming out. Everyone's probably heard of Kevin Mitnick, probably one of the most famous first hackers wanted by the FBI. Lived here up in Queensland, right, for a while. That's when we started to see real attackers come out and we saw DEF CON and Black Hat start to form, so we started to see that evolution. And then it went really quickly into crime that made money, right? Ransomware, extortion, all those sort of evolutions. And if you understand the history of, say, cybercrime in Australia, there was Phoenix and Electron. Anyone heard of Phoenix and Electron? You may have heard of Julian Assange. So they were part of a cybercrime gang operating out of Emerald in Melbourne. And that arguably was the reason the AFP started the e-crime unit, or the high-tech crime unit, because the two detectives didn't know anything about computers, but they knew they had to find these people who were hacking universities. Right, they're hacking Melbourne Uni and Monash and others in the US, NSA and what have you. So they propped themselves in the Telstra exchange in Exhibition Street and started intercepting their modem and seeing what they were doing. And that's how they got arrested. They created some fun viruses back in the day. There was one named after Midnight Oil song called the Wank virus. And that was all about nuclear power and protesting. There was the AIDS virus. They created that and put it on floppy disks at an AIDS conference. So in the 80s and 90s, nuclear and AIDS was a big thing. So they were being activists. They weren't super malicious, but they were just being activists. Fast forward, we started hearing the APTs, right? The advanced persistent threats, the attacks on major infrastructure, large-scale nation-state attacking nation-state. Now we're in the realm, and I credit this to Brian Krebs, who used this at CyberCon last year. We now have the advanced persistent teenagers. Right? The Lapsus group, Scattered Spider. These guys are all coming together, and literally they're under the age of 25. Right? Anywhere between 15 to 25-year-old men in Western countries, in jurisdiction, as we'd like to say. That's why they're getting arrested. But they're good at what they do, and you know what they do is they do phishing by calling up and getting a password changed. No malware, no ransomware, just pure social engineering, and they're really good at it, as we've seen recently with all the breaches. They pop Salesforce. We've just seen the recent one with all the schools. There's a lot of schools in the room with that application that got breached. That was purely just phishing. Really hard to keep up. Anyway, that's my history lesson over, because we start talking about the ecosystem itself. This is the old joke, is it's bigger than the organised crime, which it is, arguably. I don't go subscribe to all the figures. But ultimately, it is a big crime unit, cybercrime. When was the last time you saw an armed robbery? Now, I'm from Melbourne, we see them every day, but that's a different story. But it's like a proper armed robbery where they'd walk in with guns and rob cash. Banks don't even hold cash anymore, right? So it's all happening online. But it's well-structured. This is a well-structured, funded and controlled ecosystem where what used to happen, if I want to do an attack, I'd do my research, I'd write the malware, I'd host the command and control, I'd execute, all on my own. Now I don't have to do any of that. I don't have to know how to write ransomware. I can go buy it. Ransomware as a service, malware as a service, DDoS as a service. You know, we've seen AI, LLMs as a service, which I'll show you in a moment. Right, so I go find the system, I pay for it per month, execute. You know, it's credential stealing malware. Obviously, I need to monetize, so then I start using monetary service. I put it online for sale, forums, the like. Telegram is a big one. Discord now. Or where, you know, what we'd call the channels is not just the dark web. Dark web's quite small now. They're very tight community lockdown forums you've got to get into. You've certainly got to be able to speak the language. If you don't, you won't get in. But Telegram, it's everywhere. Telegram's huge. I did a stint in Intel world, in private intelligence at Flashpoint during COVID, and we were doing death threats against our premier in Victoria. As you can imagine, he wasn't very popular at the time, on Telegram. Lots and lots of, and there were probably 7 credible ones over a couple of years that were executed, you know, and had to be reported to law enforcement. Obviously, we get up, and then the more you do, the more expensive it is. It's actually quite cheap to buy credentials. They're about $10 at the moment in crypto. But if you want to buy 0 days exploitation packs, they obviously get more expensive. So if we look at that attack surface in general, it's the same problem we have in IT. And I say this all the time. AI is no real different to what we do today with applications, databases, everything else. We've got to do the same best practices. It's not something new they've got to go build a complete new security ecosystem for. Most what we see in AI is misconfigurations. Someone hasn't configured it correctly. We see that with cloud. And vulnerabilities. You know, something's not patched. So using it to get data theft, whether it's, you know, popping an MCP server and being a man in the middle, you know, poisoning the data, like anyone's seen some, you know, all these AI generated news sites that are popping up. You'll get these news feeds. It's all AI generated. I remember a few weeks ago we had Sydney's airport had a massive outage, right? There's storms and it was out. And then every week later, they also had the same problem. But it was just the old AI news sites picking up that original story that was real. But then if you looked at it and go, geez, every week Sydney's having a bad day at the airport. And it's just slop. So that's that manipulation of data and what do you call it, poisoning the well, if you like. So when I talk about toolkits, there's sort of 3 different buckets we sort of put them in, and this is the research Sentinel-1's done around this as well. So there's malware that literally uses AI, right? It's been developed by AI, it's leveraging LLMs, and it starts to dynamically evolve itself, right? That's not particularly uncommon in the malware space, but it's, you know, being AI enabled. Then we have AI aware, and this is where the malware knows that you're using AI for your defenses. Probably one of the most common ones of this, I think Google did the research on phishing and anti-phishing solutions. I won't name the vendors. We all know the email security vendors. They're now using AI in the background, rightly so, to detect phishing. Like, if you think about phishing, it's easy to detect. AI can do that. It's data, it's easy, read it. Does it look right? What these, because they know you're using AI to stop spam, they just inject so much prompt into their phishing, it overwhelms the defenses and it goes into a fail-safe mode or fail-open. So it lets the email through. Because it just goes, I can't process this, too much you're asking me to do. So they're essentially fooling the AI. AI is attacking AI. And of course, the other one is the dynamic adaptive. This is your typical polymorphic, if I can say it correctly, malware, but AI-driven, where it understands what's going on. So again, nothing unique here. It's the same attack vector we've seen for years around using it for recon. Like, if you're not using ChatGPT and Claude to do reconnaissance, you're wasting your time, right? Like, it's easy. Go and profile businesses, ask them to go do research. That used to be all done manually. Naturally, weaponization, we just talked about. How do I weaponize the malware and actually get it deployed? And content support, actually using AI to support your operations. So we've seen this at nation state level, and I'll cover that off, is, you know, misinformation campaigns, pushing out the right data, updating things automatically. A lot of that was time consuming. And of course, MITRE has an attack path, or a TTP path, dedicated to AI malware or AI attacks. So if you haven't seen this, you can jump on the mitre.org website. But you can see a lot of the same sort of attack kill chain we've used for years, from recon to execution and impact, but all the different little techniques. So these are the sort of things we've got to start to be able to detect and protect against, right, if we're going to go up against this type of attack. So I just grabbed some screenshots randomly. These are a little bit old now. I think they're about a year or two old. But this, like anything that happens forums get stood up. People start trying to make money. So there's malicious LLMs I can go buy. I can buy voice services, which has got a lot more mature in the last year. Being able to do spoofing phishing campaigns, voice campaigns using WhatsApp. And Worm GPT was one of the first subscription-based hacking tools. We obviously call them pen testing tools, right? Not hacking tools. That's what they'll advertise as, and you've seen them. It's quite powerful. And there's even vendors on the show floor that can automate your pen testing and your continuous hygiene. Naturally, that can be used on the other way as well, right? In the dangerous world. So in terms of sort of some of the malware we've seen recently, it's still relatively immature, but we've seen the pace of change go so fast. This is not going to last long. It's going to get super mature in not that long, right? So we're seeing the typical sort of basic data mining ones with prompt steal, doing recon, trying to find data. This is like looking on what's open on the internet. Essentially, it's the showdown of malware, looking for what they can get from by prompting public-facing AI prompts. Like I said before, Fruit Shell was the example of where the LLM, the AI embedded in the command and control that connects just using PowerShell made it look so complicated. A lot of the defenses just didn't know what it was. Right? It was like one step up from obfuscating your command to let's use AI in there, and it made it really difficult for the defenses to detect. And the Quiet Vault is just an evolution of AI using for credential stealing, right, through Java. None of those techniques are unique, right? It's just the AI is part of it. But what are we looking about geopolitical, right? Like if you think about what's been going on in the world recently, where have we seen active AI, right? So firstly, the India-Pakistan conflict that happened, it's always going on. So last May, we saw the misinformation, disinformation campaign, all driven by AI, created by AI, right? So both sides were operating the disinformation campaign. More recently, in what we call the Golden Triangle, which is, if you've not known, that's the Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. It's where all the scam sites are, right? Horrible area. It's people trafficking, kidnappings, like it's not a pleasant place. But if you think about what they do, they make fake personas. The ultimate one's pig butchering, where they contact a random person on WhatsApp and try and fatten them up and then push them to a crypto scam. But if you're a man being subdued by a woman on WhatsApp, how do you generate that? They used to have like a model, one person sit there and do a video call. Now they can AI generate that. Super easy to have a phone call with an AI chatbot who's female. So these guys are escalating the use of that and go, well, this makes it more scalable. And we've seen that in the last 12 months. This triangle is blown out of absolute proportion. We saw China actually do a massive raid, but they only really focused on their citizens. They didn't care about anybody else, which was a shame. Horrible part of the world. Our old friends at the north, this is probably not particularly surprising to anybody here, but essentially they're doing it the same way we've always seen it. It's the misinformation campaign, nation-state attack, targeted phishing, just basically doing what they do. And of course their neighbours next door, same thing, but they tend to focus on crypto. Like the number one thing North Korea need is money. They can't fund the big missiles if it doesn't have cash. The easiest way to get that is Lapsus Group goes and steals crypto. So they use AI to do that. They do crypto scamming. They do obviously targeting the domains, the exchanges and crypto wallets. And they're just using AI to escalate that, make that faster. And of course, we can't talk about this without talking about Russia. So again, state-sponsored cybercrime through the GRU is very common, FSB. And they've been doing it for years, using it, again, for all the same techniques I mentioned, recon, misinformation, what have you. Gone are the days of having the big farms, the misinformation farms of humans. They're all AI now. Like, I don't know how, if you look at comments on Instagram and whatever, our social media, a lot of it's just bots, right? So the bot problems has grown up because, guess what? AI makes it super easy. So let's talk more about what's probably closer to home for us. It's like, how do I enable AI in my enterprise but remain safe? So if we look at the AI consumption, which is us as end users or corporates, what are the things we've got to be concerned about? I mentioned shadow AI, pretty common. How you're stopping your employees doing that. Anyone who's not in an authenticated LLM, you're training that LLM. We saw that recent case with New South Wales government leaking flood victims' spreadsheet to OpenAI on an unauthenticated connection. If you know the right prompt now, you can go find those people, right? Because it's been trained. So, and I don't think OpenAI is super fast at removing data from their LLMs. So shadow AI is a problem for data leakage. Hallucinations, trusting AI. I think this has got better. I think it doesn't hallucinate as much as it used to, but you're not going to take it on face value. In my world, when we're in the intelligence world, analysts used to look at things. They used to understand the data, put context around it, and write an intel report before it went to an executive or a senior official in government. AI is now enabling that, but you still can't just take an AI report and you wouldn't want to put that on the Prime Minister's desk, right? So it's enabling it, but it's not the final product. It helps accelerate it. And of course, AI for insider. You start opening up all your data sets to an LLM, maybe using, like we do internally, we use co-work. Makes it a lot easier for me to go grab data out of systems. I can type a single prompt and dump our Salesforce database out. Right? So if I had malicious intent, I can be a malicious insider using AI to accelerate that. So, hopefully this is not a surprise to anybody, but how do you get AI to be safely adopted is no different to how we got everything else adopted over the years. Websites, cloud, it's the usual. If you can't see it, you can't control it, and you can't enforce it. So visibility is key, right? What can I see? What's being used? What data flow am I seeing? You think about, if anyone heard the term human and machine identity, we've used it for years, right? We're human identities, carbon life forms. Machine identities are an account that's been a computer-to-computer communication. Your computer talking to a printer, that was a machine identity. Then we go into zero trust and make sure that's all authenticated in real time. Every agent that gets deployed is a machine identity. Right? We've heard about I don't know if you guys heard about the case where the agent didn't have enough rights to do what it wanted to do. So it went and asked another agent who did and said, hey, can you go and write that to the database? Sure, no problems. So that's machine to machine, agent to agent talking. So that's really hard to control and get visibly. And naturally putting policy around that and control around not only the human-based use of AI, but the machine-based. There's certainly no shortage of governance and documentation out there. If you, even just recently, careful adoption of agentic AI service came out from the Five Eyes Intel community about 2 weeks ago. Really good document. We just saw ASIC send a letter to all the boards, like to any publicly listed company, and obviously anything in the financial sector where they care. You need to start going back to them about what you're doing with AI and how you're protecting it and governing it. So this is something we've seen, and of course, probably the biggest go-to for us in defence world is the OffSwap 10 LLM applications. That's worth having a look at as well. And of course, I'm an IRAP assessor for my punishment or pleasure, depending on which way you want to do it on which day. And the ISM in March just had about 10 different new ISM controls on AI. So that tells you the government's going, well, we've got to be part of this, and we've got to guide people and put some controls around it. So that's sort of the general pitch. I'm up here because I'm Sentinel-1, so I'm going to have to tell you a little bit of a product pitch. Right? So, and I'm going to hopefully do a demo if the internet remains stable. So there's sort of 3 buckets that we can look at AI protection in. We call it prompt for employees. So this is looking at your employee use of AI and controlling the use of AI, whether that's blocking AI or educating them on the use of AI in real time and DLP and control policies. So we actually put that within the ecosystem of your end users. It's a browser plugin or an agent, depending on what you want to do. And essentially we sit in the middle and we can educate them on the use of AI. Now, you think about how do you keep up with every single AI out there? I think we're over 2,500 AI websites in our database, and that updates every day. We all know the popular ones, the big name ones. I was doing some work with a K-12 school a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't know half the stuff. You guys, anyone in the K-12 or the primary school space, the AI for homework, AI for educators and teachers, we had them all in our database already, but I had not heard of half the websites. So keeping up with that is really a challenge. Gone are the days of just, turning on a proxy, just stop all AI. It's growing every day. There's one that pops up. If you flip on the other side, you're going to have developers. So they're creating AI applications, using AI to create applications, be that inside something VS Code or Claude Code. So how do I get visibility around leaking data, leaking credentials, not using the right third-party plugins that aren't malicious, so being able to real-time risk those NPM downloads they might be doing. So embed in that. So where we on the employee side, we sort of sit in the apps and the browser. On the coding side, we sit in the development platforms, the IDEs, or in between GitHub and those sort of places in the CI/CD pipeline. And of course, there's homegrown. I know anybody in here, your business will probably be releasing AI soon. We've already seen, everyone's probably done an AI chatbot in front of a retail website. And we have a retailer in the US who uses it to detect people looking for bad things that they shouldn't be buying. Right? Why are they asking that question? Right? We just saw, I think, a supermarket here in Australia come back and be a bit abusive. Right? So if you're going to create an app and then put it on your website and people are going to interact with it, you've got to put governance and control around that. One, you don't want to be attacked through prompt injections and hallucination and data poisoning. But secondly, you don't want it to be abusive back to your customers. It's essentially a virtual call center. Last week I was in New Zealand, and this never came into my mind until I was on this panel in New Zealand, and they were talking about Maori sensitivity and cultural sensitivity with the Maori population and what they expect to come back. Now, what most of us are prepared to say, all the LLMs on the market are coming from white Western nations, right? We don't necessarily have that cultural sensitivity. We'll have the same problem here with our native speakers as well. So thinking about that as a business is super important, putting controls around that, guardrails around that, and obviously data leakage and the usual stuff. And the final one, is prompt for agentic. So this is that where we sit in between the agents. So now we're protecting the agents talking to each other and the NCP server. So that's the machine to machine. Now, I'll go through these sort of quickly, right? So as I mentioned, this is all about observability, data pipeline, privacy, putting DLP policies in, all the usual things. If anyone's done DLP, it's the same here. Looking for patterns, looking for sensitive data. But it also gives you that visibility of who's using what and what you're allowing, right? So if you want to block DeepSeek, you can just block it, right? The reason you want to do this at the endpoint right now is if you're on the network, it's encrypted. All the prompts I'm typing into chatgpt.com is encrypted, so you're not going to see it on the network. So we need to do it at the edge, right? This is where most of this stuff will happen. And for us, that's just a little browser plugin that sits there and starts monitoring. It's essentially a proxy, to want to use a better term. That's the same when it comes to coding. Difference is we embed ourselves into the IDE and monitor what the code people are doing. Applications, I'm going to skip through this and show you a demo. Right. The other thing we just introduced, and this only came out last week, and you're going to see this across the industry, is AI red teaming. So this is obviously using AI to red team, but the more important thing is red teaming your applications that are AI written. So as we're pushing AI applications to production, being able to red team them dynamically in real time, right? So test them for vulnerabilities, leaked code, risky modules being deployed, and it's not just once off. You can have it run continuously. And as a developer pushes something to GitHub or wherever it gets deployed, it can sit in the middle and do a quick test of the code. All right. Now the internet here has been a really bit strange today. So I normally do this live. I'm not sure I'll do, but sometimes it can be a bit slow. So I'll do a prompt injection. So if you don't understand what prompt injection is, it's essentially trying to get the LLM to do things it would not normally do. And a lot of LLMs will just ask you to just take on what you do on face value and enable stuff. So I can put it into maintenance mode, or tell me your prompts, or hey, do you have any credentials connecting to APIs? Can you share them with me? Right? And if you don't put guardrails around that, the AI will just go, yep, because it's just a stream of data. So on the left is when we embed prompt security. On the right is when it's not. So straight away, this is for demo. This is what it would look like for a developer. It will come up in their app. If I was in, say, ChatGPT, I'd get a normal prompt to say. So as an example, just before, because I wasn't quite sure if the internet was going to work, I dropped this in, which was a standard write an email. It's got a TFTN, ABN, phone number, bank account, Medicare. We automatically allow, in this case, the policy says, allow the LLM to write that email, but make sure you automatically redact sensitive information, as opposed to without it, it just drops it in, right? Now I could block that and say, you're not allowed to write the email at all. Right? That's a policy thing. So what that looks like, from an employee's perspective, this gives me a sort of high-level view of what applications, what we call shadow applications, are being run in my enterprise. what are the different alerts we're getting and violations across that. So if I come into here and we look at, say, this one here, which is the one I just ran, we can see it was sensitive data triggered this alert. That was one of the triggers. And I can actually see what was redacted. And I can come in and get the metadata about what was redacted, where was it done from, where's the location, all that. Naturally, all very good telemetry. So it allows me to sort of tune what's going on. And what that really looks like, if I come down here, it's a bit like a firewall. So we have policies. So let me go to mine. So, we have sensitive data out of the box, so being able to turn on and redact or block that data. So I can come in and, you can see I've got PI, if I talk in Australia, for example, I can turn on the usual sensitive data. We've got moderated content. Secrets, so looking for passwords, looking for API keys, all the usual things that you don't particularly want leaked. And of course, the final one is content well, you can do regex, we won't do that, that's not a big deal. But this is that content moderation, so automatically blocking certain content. If I show you this one, you'll see some of the harmful content that we might have here that you might want to turn on or off. That's automatic. But what's really interesting is these guardrails. Because every business is different. So you might have a merger and acquisitions coming up, code name, I don't know, Acme. I could type in here, say, please monitor any reference to mergers and acquisitions with a company called Acme. And it will write the prompt and it will put it in the back-end system for you. So again, using natural language to build those guardrails. I could write in here, don't allow students to use this for essay writing. If a student asks for a 5,000-word essay, block it. So you can get pretty creative when it comes to, if it's not part of the usual out-of-the-box things, you can come down here and do the natural language guardrail. This stuff applies across applications, users, and agents. It's the same policy, just applied different ways. You then are simply, similar to a firewall, you start off at the top and you sort of filter down to open, right? So at the moment, we use Glean here at SentinelOne, which is our internal AI platform. I've just turned on do not track. Let it happen, don't care, fully trusted. I don't want DeepSeek for all users, so I block it. I can come down here and then configure, and these applications, as I said, are always updating. So I can look at all the different categories of AI that we're discovering every day and choose to do one or two. Like I haven't heard of one, is that I-26, whatever that is, right? So I can come and block that, or I can just say all applications. And this is where you decide whether you're protecting it against a policy that I just showed you. You just want to detect it, so you just want visibility. You want to block it altogether, or do not track. And then the final sort of thing in that is an open all. So just detect everything that doesn't filter down those policies. We've got a lot of policies here because each one of my SEs, as you can see, has their own because we don't want to clobber each other's demos, but normally you'd only probably have one or two. So I'm just going to time. I think I'm almost at time. One of the other features is user education. So again, as you roll this out, detection mode, you might want to prompt the user, no pun intended, about what's going on and coach them and step them through what they're doing before you naturally go start blocking things. Right, so educate first. So I think if anyone's done large DLP projects or anything that you push out, we do this as normal best practice, right? From a deployment perspective, super simple. If you've got an MDM, naturally most people are running some sort of MDM across the two big operating systems. You can download it manually from the extension stores. We've got pretty much all the browsers. If you Google Workspace, it's native. And for more localized applications like IDEs or Claude Code, we put a small lightweight agent on the endpoint. Right? Again, has to be done at the edge because we want it to capture the prompts before it gets encrypted. And that's pretty much me. If I want to leave some time for questions, if anyone has any questions.
Maybe first we'd give Brett a big thanks for standing room only, which is pretty impressive in this room. Before I forget, here's a little present from Ossert.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
And we do have time for questions. There's actually an app you can submit questions through. So I should have mentioned that first up. But if anyone has a question now, we have probably time for one or two. I can imagine.
Do you have, for applications that you can't sort of, you can't distinguish what they are, is it like an unknown type style application? And if so, what do you do with it? Do you just...
So like, you mean if someone goes to an AI website that we haven't seen before?
In your categorizations
Oh, yeah.
applications, if you can't actually distinguish, is it or is an application always
If it's,
so sort of like what it is?
yeah, if it's using, so when we're talking specifically on the endpoint, if it's using an AI, be it FAT, an application that's calling out to an LLM or an agent, we'll capture that. That's through the agent anyway. Like if I use VS Code and I use one of the Microsoft MCP servers, it'll automatically detect that, even if a user goes and installs it, if we haven't seen it. Yeah.
Okay.
If it's unknown, then probably won't know about it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't see any more questions, but just a reminder that Sentinel-1 has a stand here, and
We do.
I'm sure they're most happy to
Talk
talk,
more,
talk to you in person the rest of the conference.
100%.
So another big round of applause for Sentinel-1 and Brett.
Thank you.